Okay, this is WHAP Chapter 12, Lecture Part 3. This is going to finish it up, basically talk about the fall of the Han and Roman empires. And both of these are very similar in that it wasn't one thing that caused either one of these societies to fall. There were many problems, much of it coming from inside and not as much from foreign influences. In the Han Dynasty, you saw a lot of factions that were forming amongst the elites, and there was a ton of backstabbing going on. They had problems with land distribution as far as the wealthy had come back after Wang Mang had distributed land, and that debacle didn't work out, and they had scooped up a lot of the land. And so they had shifted the tax burden to the peasants. The peasants really didn't have a voice representing them, so there was a lot of class tension going on there. And into that, you saw these epidemics that were traveling along the Silk Roads, which made matters worse. And basically, you're going to see by 190 that the Han emperors are nothing but figureheads to generals who had amassed power, very similar to Rome as well. For the next 300, those generals become warlords. But for the next 350 years, China will be very disunited, have regional kingdoms constantly fighting with each other under the rule of these generals who are constantly trying to gain more power. And the Han had fallen basically around 220 CE. Invading nomads that came into China following the Han Dynasty's fall, because there's not as much military to protect from the nomads. These invading nomads come in, they see an opportunity and strike. When they come in, they actually start marrying into Chinese families, start taking Chinese names. It's a process of Sinicization. It's kind of like an assimilation into Chinese society. They start taking Chinese culture. It's in this time period that Confucianism really falls. Confucianism was seen as a method to create stability and order out of chaos. Well, now all there is chaos, and so Confucianism is kind of seen as irrelevant, that maybe it's not the right thing for the Chinese, that it's not working. So people began turning to Daoism and Buddhism in this time period. That's really what allows Buddhism a toehold. And something worth noting, Daoism started off as a philosophy, remember, a legal philosophy, just like legalism and Confucianism. But after the fall of the Han, it really becomes more religious in nature. Buddhism helped unify when the new dynasty took over, finally, after the Han Dynasty had fallen. Rome itself, many causes in the fall of Rome. Again, generals constantly fighting for political control. These were called the barracks emperors. Most of them died bloody, horrible assassination deaths. It's just constantly fighting. One general with a good army wants control. His men have loyalty to him, and they say, "You should be emperor." He says, "Okay, you convince me. Let's go." So there's just a lot of civil war going on. There's a lot of fighting. Rome's sheer size was a huge problem. Rome was so big that it was just so hard to manage. The epidemics come in, and that hurts the economy. And then you have the Emperor Diocletian, who sees that Rome's size is a big issue, and so he splits the empire up into two parts, an east and a western part. The Greek-speaking east and a Latin-speaking west. It's fairly successful, and over these two parts, you basically have two rulers. You have the emperor and a lieutenant, who's kind of a co-ruler, and you got an emperor and a lieutenant on the other side as well. These four men became known as the tetrarchs. Diocletian helps with inflation. He sets some limits on prices and stuff. He's fairly successful, but the political infighting amongst the tetrarchs would be an issue. And Diocletian actually, he's not assassinated. Diocletian actually gets old and frail, and he retires from office. And when he retires from office, he has a handpicked successor. It doesn't go like he plans, though, and basically civil war emerges after his resignation from his post. And into that civil war, Constantine would actually win the job, and he would emerge as a emperor, and he reunifies the empire. He says, no, the whole empire is under one emperor like it was before. I'm also building a new capital. We're moving the capital from Rome to a place named after me called Constantinople. Constantinople was in a strategic location The Greek-speaking half, the eastern half of the Roman Empire, was the wealthier half, and so this strategic location with trade routes and stuff coming into that section of Rome. Of course, Germanic migrations, they've been happening for hundreds of years in Rome. Romans typically had, they kept the Germans as buffer states outside of their empire. They didn't really care for the Germanic peoples coming into the Roman Empire and settling. But with a new threat out there, the Huns, basically a Turkish-speaking people from Central Asia, kind of related to the Xiangshu that gave the Chinese so many problems. They're beating everybody in their path. They're an unstoppable military machine. They're putting so much pressure on the Germanic peoples that they are running from the Huns. They see the Romans and the Huns, and they view the Huns as the bigger threat. So it pushes them inside the Roman borders where there's conflict. Rome is weakened at this time. There's a brain drain. All the best people in the Roman Empire have gone east because that's where the money is. In 410, Rome is sacked by Alaric, who's a Visigoth, basically like a Russian Scandinavian mix. And in 476, the last Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, just a 14-year-old boy, will be killed, and that's the end of the Roman Empire in the West. But for 1,000 years, Rome survives in the East. It's just half the size that it used to be. It'll be a Greek-speaking Rome, and will become known by historians as something different called the Byzantium dynasty, which we'll talk about in the next chapter. Now, culture changed a little bit with what's going on in Rome. There was a mixture of Germanic and Roman traditions as these Germanic peoples came in. Christianity survived the fall of Rome. Now, Christianity had become strong because Constantine had accepted Christianity as his faith. He promoted it. After him, Theodosius would actually make it the official religion. And while Christianity attracted poor people early on, it would eventually spread upwards, and the rich people up top would convert to Christianity, which really enabled it to survive. St. Augustine was one of the most famous missionaries in the later time period of Christianity. He was an intellectual. He was a Manichaeist at first. He had dabbled in all these different religions and settled finally on Christianity and wrote some really nice stuff. Was a fantastic writer that really helped Christianity spread and stay stable. But there were a lot of debates over the humanity of Jesus, and you had all these people saying, no, this is true, no, this is true, and finally they got together and they basically settled upon what we know as the New Testament today as these accepted gospels, where some gospels weren't accepted into the New Testament. They were seen as false. And really that's Christianity. And next time we come to this section, you'll see what Christianity does for Middle Age Europe.